Oh, okay. It looks like it's going now, Councillor Robinson. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good evening and welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting for Monday, April 24th, 2023. I'm Stephen Robinson and I will be your chairperson tonight. First, we'll start off with our land acknowledgement. On April 24th, 2023, we acknowledge that this sacred land on which Smiths Falls is now located has been a site of human activity for over 10,000 years and is rich in Indigenous history. This land is the ancestral site of human activity. This land is the ancestral and unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. We are grateful to the Algonquin ancestors who cared for the land and water in order that we might meet here today. We are also grateful to the Algonquin people for their contribution in the making of the Rideau Canal, which runs through Smiths Falls. We are mindful of broken covenants and the need to reconcile with all our relations. Together, may we care for this land and each other, drawing on the strength of our mutual history of nation building through peace and friendship, being mindful of generations to come. Okay, so I don't believe we have any amendments to the agenda. Councillor McGuire.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. For 8.2, I'm proposing that we defer that to a future week. Our Municipal Heritage Committee has the first meeting of the year this coming Wednesday, and I think it'd be great if they could have a chance to look at the bylaw before it comes to Committee of the Whole.
Discussion on that? Or we'll wait until then. Okay, so 8.2. All right. Disclosure of monetary interest. Seeing none. Okay. So we have some delegations tonight. Lanark County Shared Services. And first off, we're going to have a presentation by the Director of Lanark Lodge, Carrie Duncan. So if you'd like to come on and welcome.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, and hopefully you can see that all right.
So far.
Okay, wonderful. I'll just put it into SlideShare mode. Okay, hopefully that's going to work all right for us.
Well, it hasn't enlarged on our screen, but or not on mine anyway. But
try one more time. And if not, I'll just make this one a little bit bigger.
well, that's good.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Might be a little bit easier to work from that than the presentation mode. So thank you so much for the opportunity to be here with you this evening. I'd like to share a little bit of an overview of Lanark Lodge, which is our long-term care home located in beautiful Perth as well. So I'm just going to move to the next slide. So Lanark Lodge, I'm sure many of you are very familiar, is home to 163 residents. It does include one short stay bed, which means that residents can come in and out for respite as often as they'd like to. We are a Class B home, which means we are set to at least the 1972 standards, but not to the A-class home standards. But we do have full air conditioning in the home. The majority of our home beds are either privates or semi-privates, meaning that it's a private room with a shared bathroom. And we are a major employer to over 250 team members. And that's team members from across Lanark County, Smiths Falls, Perth, the outside area. So we're a very major employer in this area as well. So if we take a look at all the long-term care homes in Ontario, they're all funded and regulated by the provincial government. And the number and location of long-term care beds in Ontario is determined by the ministry. And there's variances in the types of ownership and governance. And this does include not-for-profit, municipal, and for-profit homes. And of course, Lanark Lodge is a municipal home. So in terms of, if we take a look at the number of beds in Ontario, we see that there's 611. So of that, we've got 151 of those that are not-for-profit, or 25%, 100 long-term care homes that are municipal homes, representing 16%, and the majority at 360 are for-profit homes. Okay, so if we take a look at how long-term care is legislated, every long-term care home in Ontario is legislated under the Fixing Long-Term Care Homes Act, which came into effect in April 2022. And under the Act, every single upper or single tier southern municipality is mandated to maintain at least one municipal home. And municipalities may enter into an agreement to help maintain a home. The funding itself, as I mentioned before, it does come from the province, and it's very much based on the number of beds in operation and the types of services that the home provides. So municipal homes like Lanark Lodge receive additional funding through the municipality, so through the levy, and that really goes to enhance staffing levels, services, which lead to improved quality of care. And there's no doubt that Lanark Lodge has an excellent reputation for high-level quality care. Residents also pay an accommodation, which is called co-payments based on the accommodation type. And these rates are set by the ministry. So I've given you the most current rates, which came out in October 2022. So it's just over $1,900 for a basic accommodation, $2,336 for a semi-private accommodation, and $2,769 for private accommodation. And as mentioned before, subsidies are available for residents for basic accommodation. Okay, so the provincial funding is provided through a subsidy called the level of care, which is done on a per diem basis. And there's 4 primary envelopes, and the funding within these envelopes can only be used for very specified purposes. So the first one is nursing and personal care. So that is really funding that relates to nursing and other direct care staff who assess, plan, provide, and assist and document direct care provided to the residents, supplies and equipment used by the staff to provide that care to the residents. The second envelope is called programs and support services, and that funds staff, equipment related to programs and therapies provided to residents. So for example, in our home, we most recently added a support services worker 1 day a week, which has been a very welcome addition. The next envelope is nutrition services. It used to be called raw food quite a while ago. So this does then attribute to the purchase of nutritional support, including food materials, supplements, and prepared therapeutic food supplements as appropriately prescribed for a resident. The last envelope is other accommodation, and that includes housekeeping services, building and property operations and maintenance, dietary services, laundry, linen, and general administrative services as well. So that just equates to about $188 per resident per day, plus a global per diem of $753 a day. There are additional supplementary funding that homes can be provided. For example, behavioral supports, which at Lanark Lodge we do receive funding for, and social services, like I just mentioned. Any unspent funds in the nursing and personal care envelope are returned to the province, and unspent funds in the other accommodation envelope can be retained for a municipal home, typically are put right back into operations. So if we take a look at exactly what that means then for Lanark Lodge, this is what was submitted as part of our 2023 budget. We can see that the annual average cost per bed per resident is about $136,000 a year. And this is largely funded by the Ministry of Long-Term Care, about 57% or $77,000 per bed. The resident makes up a proportion of the next part, which is $3.9 million or 18% of the budget, and 24,000 bed. And you'll see for the municipality that it's covered 25% or about $5.6 million or 35,000 per bed. So how this works out for Smiths Falls is that a portion of the Lanark Lodge levy is contributed to by the town of Smiths Falls, and that's about $436,000 for 2023, and it's based on a weighted tax assessment. So in terms of waitlists and admissions, so waitlists and admissions are managed by the Home and Community Care Support Services, formerly known as CCAC. So we as a home, we don't manage specifically who comes into the home. We help provide whether or not that resident is approved for admission, but all admissions and waitlists are managed by Home and Community Care. And over the pandemic, we saw a large majority of admissions coming from the hospital. So that was through the form of crisis placements, and under Bill 7, which saw residents designated as alternate levels of care being transferred from hospitals into long-term care centers. And I'm happy to report that more recently, we're starting to see some admissions coming from the community. So in terms of some of the current challenges and opportunities that we have, I don't think this list will be particularly surprising to many of you, especially the first one that's listed under the challenges. And that really is the health human resource crisis. So what we're seeing in acute care, in other healthcare sectors, it's definitely impacting long-term care as well. And we're seeing significant challenges in health human resources at this point in time as well. The second is funding stability. We've had lots of funding envelopes come and go, especially around our recent COVID containment and prevention funding. We recently saw the CMI funding freeze and has just become unfrozen, and that's going to come into play again for this year. We see definitely the impact of inflation and financial pressures as a result of that on things like utilities, products, and definitely in food costs. We still see challenges in capacity in long-term care. So there's a lot more people waiting for long-term care beds, both in the hospital and in the community, than there are long-term care beds available. And we're also seeing the increasing complexity and acuity of residents. And I don't think that comes as a surprise either, in terms of people are wanting to stay in their homes a lot longer than they may have in the past. And they're able to do that through supports like the community paramedic program, home and community care services. So by the time that they're ready for long-term care, they are often a lot older, potentially sicker, and have more complex needs. But that said, we have tons of opportunity, and this is a really exciting time in long-term care. We're seeing this major transformation in seniors' care, things moving more to emotion-focused care models. And what that really means is that residents now drive the care that's being provided to them. For as long as I've been in long-term care and in healthcare, we've always been very task-focused. So it's really exciting to see this motion now come into place where it's going to be the residents really driving the care and services that they want. We're also seeing long-term care move into centers of excellence, and that's what we're striving to do at Lanark Lodge as well. So for residents, as I mentioned, it's really going to be driven by them and what their needs and wants are. For staff, we want to be that center of excellence. We want to be that home, and I think we already are, where people want to come to work, where they want to stay, where they can learn, where they can grow. And lastly, it's community. So how do we potentially in the future look to bridge those residents or those individuals who are currently living in their homes, where we can maybe provide some support services to help keep them in their homes longer, but still provide some bridge to other care and services that they might need. And lastly, another opportunity is really improving that seniors care continuum right across the sector. So how we continue to work even more closely with our hospital partners, our community agencies, home and community care. So the very last slide I want to leave you with is truly, at the end of the day, as an entire organization, we want to thank you so much for all your support and for that of Lanark County's support. It really is an honor and a privilege to care for those in our community who require long-term care, and that's made possible because of you. So thank you very much for your time tonight. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. You can take that, and there we go. Director Claire Costello, have you got something you'd like to add to this?
Yeah, my apologies, Carrie, for interrupting. Just to let council know, the issue at the beginning of the meeting, we had an issue with the Facebook stream, but we are live streaming on YouTube, and I have posted a notice on Facebook with the link so that people are able to watch the meeting. But I just wanted to let you all know that. Carrie, my apologies. I'll let council go ahead with their Q&A.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor McKenna.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much, Carrie. Of course, I have the privilege of representing Smiths Falls along with Mayor Panko at the county table, and we get fairly regular reports from Carrie, her team. I just want to comment on the level of accountability for not-for-profit homes and municipally run homes. Carrie, like our water treatment plant, the Ministry of Health comes in and does regular inspections of the Lanark Lodge, and Carrie is obliged to come and she reports that to full council on a regular basis. Exceptional results, by the way. And county council also they've got their ear to the ground. And if there are issues, they bring those back. So the level of accountability for the lodge, I think, is admirable. It adds to the quality of care. It adds to the transparency. And as Carrie pointed out, unlike the for-profit sector, if Carrie's and her team are able to save some money on one area, it all goes right back into the operation side and not to the for-profit center. So I just want to commend Carrie and all of the lodge staff for their level of accountability, the transparency, and then the high quality of work. And of course, Smiths Falls is very proud to be a partner in the delivery of that. So thank you.
Thank you for your kind comments.
Anyone else? Councillor Quinn and then Councillor Brennan.
Thank you. And Carrie, yes, we do understand what you're running there, and it is quite an operation. One of my concerns is, how do we make the public more aware of what goes on there? And how do we get the public more involved? Like, you know, people coming in on a volunteer basis to read books to people or to sit and chat with them, or the older people love animals, bring your pets in. And one of the things, I don't know whether you've heard of this or not, but I have been organizing what's called Smiles for Lonely Seniors at Christmas time. And these are gifts that we give to seniors in homes or in their own homes that are all by themselves. Now, is that something that we could work with you and maybe do something there? So you know what I'm saying? The public needs to know how to help, how to be part of what you're running. And so that makes the job easier for you and your staff. And it makes people aware of what's happening.
Great. Thank you so much. And your comments, Councillor Donna, are really appreciated. I can tell you we have a wonderful group of volunteers. And in fact, we have a volunteer tea coming up this Thursday. And I believe we've got over 22, 24 volunteers coming. And of course, I think the biggest challenge that we faced is the impact that COVID has had on the face of long-term care and people's perception of what long-term care is. Unfortunately, many homes, long-term care homes, were painted with the same brush in terms of the care and the services that were provided in that really difficult and challenging time. But as many of you know, long-term care is a very special place, and it's a wonderful place where people can come volunteer, where they can help out with things like our tuck shop, where they can come and sit with a resident and read, where they can help, porter residents to and from meals, and really just be a wonderful social ambassador for our home as well. So we do a lot with our community. We're starting to now have events more with our community. I don't know if any of you have been following our Facebook page on Lanark County, but we've had recently a community member bring in some baby goats, and that was certainly a beautiful experience for all of us. I did try and keep one in my office, but they wouldn't let me. That said, I think there's always wonderful ways that we can continue to collaborate with the community. And we'll make sure that if there's any opportunities moving forward that we do post that on our Facebook page, and certainly we'll share that with our county council members as well. But certainly volunteering is a really important and wonderful way to become an integral part of our home.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Councillor Brennan.
Yep. Thank you, Carrie. And I'm really happy to see you here. And Lanark Lodge is such an important part of our community. And I'm not very good at math, but when you outline the average cost per bed and our contribution, which is substantial. So what would that equate to is the number of residents for Smiths Falls? Not to put you on the spot, because I should be able to work it out myself, but I didn't.
No, absolutely. And of course, with the wait list being managed by Home and Community Care, it's not that, it's a certain designated number of residents. We do get a very high number of residents coming from Smiths Falls, but that would never cap, for example, the number of residents that do come into our home. Without doing the math, off the top of my head, I believe it's, probably about 4. If we take a look at it being 136,000 per bed per resident per year, and the contribution being 436, so just roughly around 4. Yeah. But again, it's not correlated. It really is a weighted assessment based on taxes.
Yes, I know that. And I know people that are residing there now, and they're getting great care. Through the chair, just one more question for you, because we've heard, and I'm wondering about the future of Lanark Lodge, and there's some infrastructure concerns, and wondering where that is at this point.
Great. So through the chair, thank you very much, Councillor Brennan. So we strive to keep our facility as up to date as possible. And as you may know, we underwent an over $3 million HVAC renovation project just last year alone. So that means that all of our residents' home areas and the resident rooms do have air conditioning, which is a requirement under the Fixing Long-Term Care Act. So we're very proactive as we can be in an older building, in keeping it up to date, in keeping it current. We have a lot of our contractors who provide information on things that might need to be upgraded or replaced in the coming years. So we do try and make sure that we have a very solid 5 to 10 year plan at this point in time. As you may be aware, that it's a little bit different for municipal homes in terms of licensing, because homes, municipalities are required to have a long-term care home. They're not licensed the same as for-profit or not-for-profit homes. So in terms of redevelopment, we're still probably quite a piece out at this point in time.
Okay, thanks for that, and thanks for coming.
Thank you very much.
Mayor Panko?
Yeah, like everyone else, thanks, Carrie. A fabulous job caring for our older population, and recognizing early in the pandemic, as we saw, the situation in long-term care homes was dire, and the death rate was high and infections were very high. And I honestly worried about how Lanark Lodge would manage through really such incredible difficulties. And from my recollection, it came through with shining stars, and did an incredible job of protecting some of our older and, of course, probably more vulnerable population. So thank you for that. The changes, the province made changes through the pandemic, as a result of the pandemic, I guess, moving towards private, semi-private situations, rooms arrangements, no longer, I guess, 4 to a room. Is that still valid? And does that impact how you operate and the number of people you can accommodate? And also understanding, I guess, as a caregiver, the difficulties many people are still having in finding a home, especially close by, for their loved ones. Understanding the municipal contributions, in my mind, create an outstanding level of care that probably can't be replicated exactly elsewhere in a for-profit environment. So the demand for space at Lanark Lodge always seems somewhat constrained. Is there plans to try and help augment the number of rooms available and the number of our seniors you can care for?
So through the chair, thank you very much, Mayor Panko. So you're right, Lanark Lodge did exceptionally well throughout the pandemic. And in fact, we only saw our first outbreak, I believe it was April, almost a year ago, actually, compared to how long this pandemic has been going on. And fortunately, the home did very well. And that was 100% through the commitment of the exceptional leadership and staff members who were here at the front lines, and just the care and dedication to those residents. So thank you for your kind words. We were fortunate at Lanark Lodge that we weren't impacted by ward beds. So the ward beds in Lanark Lodge were removed a number of years ago. So the home actually did not have any 3 or 4 bed rooms. So for us, the maximum number that we have in a room at any time is 2. But as I mentioned, we've got a majority of our rooms are privates or semi-privates. So we're actually able to have a lot more rigorous infection control standards because of that. However, I understand that there is still the plan to remove 3 and 4 bed rooms for other long-term care homes where they may still exist, for sure. You are right. The wait list, especially at a home like Lanark Lodge, which does have a very good reputation. I'm not tooting my own horn. I'm tooting the staff, their horn, and the care and commitment that they provide. So we've traditionally had a very long wait list, and that does continue. We saw that shift happening, especially because Bill 7, where we saw a lot more residents coming out of hospital. So the impact to those living in the community was definitely great, without a doubt. For us, we had some isolation beds, as you may know. Homes were required to also have isolation beds throughout the pandemic. And we very quickly, once we received the notice that we were no longer required to have those, we opened those up for admissions. So we had about 11 admissions in a very short period of time. The one way that we're working to help alleviate some of the care concerns in the community is through our respite bed at this point in time, which now has been regularly booked since it was opened up again at the end of last year. And we're hoping with the redevelopment, down the road that does happen, that we'll take a look and consider any future needs that are required for beds at that point in time as well.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, I have a follow-up question.
Sure.
Carrie, you mentioned, and I believe it was a county council presentation a little while back too, people are aging at home longer. And by the time they do end up in long-term care, their health needs tend to be more complex and more difficult. Does that impact your staffing and the ability to provide the level of care that we all believe is appropriate and needed?
Through the chair, another excellent question. So you're absolutely right. When I started in long-term care, probably about 25, almost 30 years ago, I even hate to date myself, but it's very true. Lots of some good experience. Residents had their own cars. They were driving, they had parking spots, they were going out to their own doctor's appointments. It wasn't true of absolutely everybody, but certainly, most residents were quite ambulatory when they were coming in at that point in time. Now what we find is that the residents who are coming in might need more things like IV therapy. Some may require dialysis, G-tube feeds. They may require more bariatric care, certainly a lot more wound care. So the complexity of the residents is in fact changing. What's exciting is that we're seeing the scope of practice, especially of registered staff, changing as well. So, specifically, if I take a look at my RPN colleagues, their scope of practice has expanded a great deal in the last 20 years to the point that they're now doing many things that I did, as an RN 25 years ago. So what we're finding in terms of staffing, as you may know, the government has committed to providing 4 hours of care per resident per day by 2025. And I understand that was based on old standards from an old report. So I'm sure we could even benefit from more resident care hours during that point in time. So what I'm hoping is that we'll continue to see as we get more complex residents, that we continue to get more funding to help support those residents, both in terms of not just staffing, but also equipment needs that might be required for those residents as well. So we're evaluating every single admission on a case-by-case basis. We work closely with our hospital on more of those complex cases for sure, and really making sure we can make those residents' needs, fulfill those resident needs through additional training and support of our community partners as well. So I find that what's really needed here is that collaborative approach. It really is the additional funding that's required to care for these complex residents and really ensuring that our team is practicing to their full scope.
Well, thanks, Carrie, and thank you to you and your team for, all you do for our loved ones.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else? No. Well, I'd like to thank you for your very informative presentation. It was well done. And I know you've got a previous engagement, and I'm not going to take up any more of your time. So thank you again.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you.
Okay, next on the list, we have the Director of Social Services, Emily Hollington. Welcome.
Good evening, members of council. Thanks for having me here. I just think Carrie's going to share the slides. So. Great. Okay, you can move ahead to the next slide, Carrie, please. All right, so I'm going to provide you a brief overview of what we do in social services at Lanark County. So in Ontario, core social services are delivered and co-funded by 47 consolidated municipal service managers. Service managers are responsible to oversee systems planning and the delivery of services, including income and employment supports, community housing, homelessness, childcare and early years. So Lanark County is the service manager for both the county and the town of Smith Falls. Ontario is the only jurisdiction in Canada where municipal government holds responsibility for social services. So why are we set up this way? People can access a variety of services in one place. Municipalities know their communities best, and it gives us an opportunity to design services that are representative of Lanark County as opposed to Toronto, and services planned and coordinated with a variety of local supports. And you'll see that further in my presentation. So we report and are funded by 3 separate ministries, including the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Children, Community and Social Services, and the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. Next slide, thanks. So in our social services department in Lanark County, we have 4 program areas. So children's services, housing services, Ontario Works, and community support services. There are approximately 60 full-time employees. We have offices in 3 locations, one in Smith Falls on 52 Abbott Street. We have a strong relationship with the province, and the majority of our programs and services are legislated or mandated. Our annual budget is approximately $51.5 million. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to go a little brief overview over each of those 4 program areas that I spoke about. So children's services. So Lanark County oversees and funds licensed childcare programs at 30 sites through third-party agreements. One of our childcare providers is the town of Smith Falls. We maintain contracts with 2 licensed home childcare agencies that support multiple home childcare businesses in the community. We administer the childcare fee subsidy program. So for families that can't afford to pay for the full licensed childcare fees, we maintain a contract with ConnectWell to offer special need resourcing support to the childcare centers. We also support and oversee and fund the Early On Child and Family Center. With that, we maintain a contract with Children's Resources on Wheels, or better known as CROW. We're also responsible for building capacity in the childcare system, much like what Carrie mentioned in healthcare. There is a lack of licensed early childhood educators, and we really struggle with hiring and maintaining ECEs in the field. So we do a lot of work around retention and promotion of that industry. You may also have heard of the Canada-wide Early Learning and Childcare System. This is $10 a day childcare. So Lanark County is responsible for implementing that. By next year, parents should see the average fees of childcare being about $10 a day. There's a lot of work that's gone into that. In 2022, there was a 25% reduction in fees, and in 2023, parents saw a further reduction of 52.75%. So that will be fully implemented, that $10 a day program, by 2026. Next slide, please. So housing services, that's the second program we're going to talk about. Lanark County is responsible for managing and funding community housing, which was downloaded to municipalities in 2001. Lanark County is legislated to maintain 771 service level standard units. I did want to mention that since 2018, we've added 120 units to those service level standards, which is great. A great feat. Council has been very dedicated to increasing the amount of affordable housing in our community. So we municipally fund, administer, and manage 512 social housing units through the Lanark County Housing Corporation. In these units, rent is typically calculated at 30% of a tenant's income, so that is known as rent geared to income. These units are heavily subsidized by municipal dollars. Rent supplement is another way that we have rent geared to income units. We fund and administer about 73 rent supplements, and those are contracts with private landlords, where again, the tenant pays 30% of their income towards rent, and Lanark County subsidizes the difference up to market rent. We also fund and support 5 nonprofit housing providers that manage 182 rent geared to income units, and I've listed those providers out there. Next slide, please. So I thought I'd talk about a little bit about the other programs that we offer outside of rent geared to income housing. So we have a portable housing benefit. It's a municipally, there's two of them. One is municipally funded and the other is provincially and federally funded. And this is a monthly subsidy provided to low income households to help make rent more affordable. We have approximately 78 municipal portable housing benefits, 20 new ones under the Ontario Priorities Housing Initiative, and 164 under the Canada Ontario Housing Benefit. So that program has been growing steadily every year since it was first introduced. Affordable housing, so we have 53 affordable housing units located across the county. And these units, rent is typically set at 80% of average market rent. So these units were made possible through a contribution to the capital of that program, of that building, with a long-term commitment to keep rents affordable. We have a Renovate Lanark program. It's provincially and federally funded. It's a 10-year forgivable loan. Actually, this is just increased by council. So this presentation is actually a little bit out of date. So it's up to $15,000 for essential home repairs. So we do things like replacing furnaces, roofs, windows, and doors. We also have a homeownership program. It's a 20-year forgivable loan. And again, this is a little out of date, but it's up to 8% of the purchase price for a first home buyer to use towards their down payment. We have caseworkers that work with tenants to support housing retention, greater independence, social inclusion, community participation. A new program that we've just launched this month is an affordable housing capital grant. It's a 10-year forgivable loan of up to $25,000 to help cover the capital costs of creation of one new affordable housing rental unit. So that could be an additional residential unit in your home. It could be a landlord who's building a 10-unit building and wants to have one unit as affordable. So again, $25,000. For that program, the county's allocated $100,000 in this year's budget. So hopefully we'll be able to create 4 new units. Homemakers, which is a provincially funded program, and it's housekeeping assistance for eligible households that are also in receipt of personal care. I have mentioned a couple new projects, but I have some pictures of them and on the next slide, so I'll speak to them in a second. Next slide, please, Carrie. So I thought I would just include some pictures of some of the rent geared to income units that Lanark County owns that are located in Smith Falls. So there's Bell Avenue, Burke Street, and Sussex and Empress. And in Lanark Street, Cars, Parkland Court, and some units on Thurber Street. Jasper Avenue, so we have a number of units there. McGill and Broadview, again, a few units there. So some ongoing projects. The top left is a picture of a project that's currently under construction for Robinson. It'll be located in Robinson Street in Perth. It's 2 tiny homes. They are carbon sink tiny homes, so it's a positive for the environment, and they're going to be used for transitional housing for people experiencing homelessness. The picture on the right is 188 Chambers Street in Smith Falls. That's a 5-unit, 1-bedroom building. So 5 one-bedroom units. They're all rent geared to income. This building is set to open in June. We are working on doing offers to people right now, so it's exciting. It's 100% paid through Social Services Relief Fund. So provincial funding we got as part of the pandemic. The bottom left is 144 Chambers Street. I'm fairly certain you're aware of this building as well. It's actually being developed by CareBridge. It's 28 of the units are going to be rent geared to income. So the county's made a $3.6 million contribution to this. 2.9 million is municipal dollars and 700,000 came from Social Services Relief Fund. We've also committed to a 40-year agreement with CareBridge to ensure that those rents stay at rent geared to income. So we will be subsidizing the operating at that building. So very exciting projects, 2 of which are in Smith Falls. So Ontario Works. So Ontario Works provides financial assistance to individuals and families who meet prescribed criteria. In February of 2023, we processed 68 applications. 807 households were in receipt of assistance, which was about 1,400 people. I did want to note that a single person receives a maximum of $733 per month while on Ontario Works. So it's very limited, and that money can include money for food, shelter, clothing, household costs. We also provide prescription medications and other health costs. A big part of Ontario Works is working closely with a caseworker, and we work on client-centered planning and helping them identify and overcome barriers. We work on life stabilization and employment planning, goal setting and progress, and practical counseling, really looking at all aspects of a person's life to help them become self-sufficient and independent. We have an emergency assistance program. So this is a one-time assistance to a family that might be, or a person that might be affected by situations such as the pandemic, being evicted from their home, leaving an abusive relationship, worried about safety. This has been heavily accessed by Ukrainian migrants and Syrian refugees. So it's one-time assistance. In February of this year, I'm just using February because we had those stats when I prepared it. We helped 13 households that month and 26 people received assistance. Temporary care assistance is financial assistance to an adult caring for a child who is not theirs. So eligibility is based on the income and the assets of the child, and the adult must be making reasonable efforts to seek support from the person legally responsible for the child. So typically these are children that have been placed in the care of a family or a friend by Child and Family Services. So in February of this year, 71 children were in receipt of temporary care assistance. Next slide. I just wanted to mention briefly, social assistance is under transformation in Ontario. How social assistance is going to be delivered is in the process of changing, so we're working through that right now. With a big focus removing employment from Ontario Works and focusing on person-centered planning and really helping clients become stable, which is great because that is a lot of what we have been doing all along. Next. So community support services. One of the things we do in this department is managing homelessness. So the county maintains a by name list of people experiencing homelessness. And what we do with this list is really use it as a way for someone who's experiencing experiencing homelessness to have some wraparound services around them. So it's a few agencies that sit on a committee together to support these folks. In February, there were 32 actively homeless individuals in Lanark County. 16 were experiencing chronic homeless, so had been homeless for 6 months or longer. 3 were youth, 6 were families, 19 were female, and 13 were male. 2 had transitioned from provincial institutions to homelessness, so that's typically from incarceration. We received 9 new referrals in that month, and 5 individuals were housed. Next slide, please. So we maintain a housing assistance program. It's $1,500 to a household to help cover things like utility and rent arrears, utility deposits, hotel and motel stays for people experiencing homelessness. We have contracts with 5 private for-profit providers who offer supportive housing. One of them is a Victoria House that's located in Smith Falls. We contract with Victim Services for after-hour emergency response to homelessness. And we have caseworkers that provide ongoing case management. Developmental support services. So we administer the Adult Protective Services Worker Program, and this is caseworkers who support adults who have a developmental disability who are living on their own in the community to assist them in strengthening their capacity in managing and acquiring the skills they need for daily living. So they help with advocacy, ensuring that they receive access to the proper services and supports, managing their health and medical needs, coordination and case management of other community resources, support with problem solving, life skills coaching. So a little bit about our revenue. This is based on the 2021 budget. So you can see 61% of our funding comes from the provincial and federal governments. 30% is from the local municipalities, 3% from the town of Smith Falls, and 6% from user fees. So that is rent in our housing units. So expenditures, you'll see that 67% is spent directly on programs and services we offer, 16% on wages, benefits, and training, 8% on operating our housing units, and 7% on capital investments, and then a small part on utilities and other contracts. So a little bit about how Ontario Works is funded by the town of Smith Falls. So Ontario Works benefits, social assistance benefits, are 100% provincially funded. Administration of Ontario Works is shared 50-50 between the municipality and the province. So Smith Falls' share of that 50% is costed at 3-year rolling caseload average of percentage of cases that are located in this town of Smith Falls versus the county. Housing services. So I should mention that Ontario Works was $590,000 from the town of Smith Falls to Ontario Works in 2022. So housing services, the cost of housing is based on weighted assessment. Some programs are 100% provincially and federally funded. So things such as renovate, homeownership, nonprofit capital repairs, those things are provincially and federally funded. Client benefits and homelessness are 100% provincial, and administration, again, is cost shared based on weighted assessment. In 2022, $540,000 from the town of Smith Falls to the county for housing and homelessness. Children's services, client benefits, and things like fee subsidy or $10 a day childcare is 100% provincial and federal funding. And the remainder of childcare is cost shared at the percentage of actual licensed childcare Smith Falls spaces compared to the total number of files that the county administers. So in 2022, that was 145,000. And the Adult Protective Services Worker Program, which I spoke to last, is 100% provincially funded with no municipal cost share. I did want to mention too that we have a lot of involvement in the community with doing things like creating opportunity for public engagement. We recently, or last year, did a municipal tools to support affordable housing strategy. We participate in on a number of communities, committees, such as the Lanark County Situation Table, Community Safety and Wellbeing Steering Committee. And we have partnerships with a wide variety of agencies that we fund and collaborate with. And I just provided our contact information. If you are speaking with people that have questions about our services, encourage them to reach out to us. They can stop into an office, call, or email. And that concludes my report.
Thank you very much. Any discussion? Nobody's got any discussion. Councillor Brennan?
Oh, yeah. I just want to thank you, Emily. It's a massive job you have, and we're happy to partner with the county on all that you do. And thank you for coming. And it's a real education. I hope people are watching and they can understand the enormity of your job and how we have a partnership with you and provide services to our citizens. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Mayor Panko.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. Can you talk a little bit about the 10-year housing and homelessness plan and the county's plan to address the housing challenge that we see our citizens facing now and going forward?
Yeah, for sure. So Under the Housing Services Act, the county is required to maintain a 10-year housing and homelessness plan. In it, I believe there's something like 43 recommended actions, which we have been working on. One that we've really focused on is increasing actual housing stock. And every year we have a plan to either build housing stock or to add to our portable housing benefits. And as I mentioned in the last term of council, we added 120 units to that. So we have plans to continue to do that. We have met or surpassed every goal on increasing stock, which is good, but of course there's always a lot more to do. Another initiative we have is that municipal tools to support affordable housing strategy, and so that is really a toolkit for the county and local municipalities to look at. It includes official plan policies that will encourage development of affordable housing. So we have lots of ongoing initiatives. Other things was like we did a Yes in My Backyard campaign this year. We did 6 public sessions open to the public on educating about the importance of housing and homelessness. So we are forever working on that plan. And although it's a 10-year plan, it's updated every 5 years, and that 5 years is coming up in 2 years. So by next year, we'll be thinking about our update again.
Well, thank you. And I frequently hear from people in my community who are facing homelessness, facing eviction, don't know where to turn. And so I frequently send them to your department, and you do all you can to help. So thank you.
Anyone else? Councillor Quinn?
Thank you. And Emily, it's nice seeing you this evening. I've missed seeing you. I very much enjoyed the committee that we had. And is there any thought of putting that committee back together? It was interesting. Mm-hmm. And it puts us out there on the street. You can't be everywhere at once. You can't. Your workload's too heavy. And I understand that. Anyway, just a thought, maybe we could help out with something. Just like I said, have missed seeing you. A lot of interesting things happen. I learned so very, very much. And again, I spoke earlier about Smiles for Lonely Seniors, and I do go to Lanark County Housing and help them with some of that. So it's wonderful. It's wonderful to be there. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you.
Well, nobody else is putting their hand up. I would like to thank you personally for an excellent presentation. You've educated me on what it is that that your organization does. I wasn't aware of all of the things you do. So anyway, thank you very much. It was a pleasure having you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, next we have the Lanark County Paramedic Service Chief, Travis Mellema. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. I'll attempt to share my screen and see how that works for us. Is that working?
It is.
Excellent. So thank you for having me this evening. As introduced, I'm for Lanark County Paramedic Service. I've been with Lanark County Paramedic Service I'm entering my 19th year now, starting as a frontline medic. And then back just before the pandemic hit, I was fortunate or unfortunate enough, depending on how you look at it, to receive the position of chief. So I'm going to be here tonight to talk to you a little bit about the service, how we operate, where our bases are located, some of our call volume, and about our amazing staff. So just a little quick history on the service. Lanark County Ambulance Service at the time was created in 2000 at the download, the amalgamation of the 4 county services. And then back in 2013, we renamed it Lanark County Paramedic Service to again emphasize, try to get away from the old adage of ambulance drivers and showcase more the medical professionals that staff service. Almont General Hospital was chosen in 2000 to operate the service on behalf of the county and has continued to do so ever since. We're one of only 5 paramedic services in the province of Ontario that are operated by a hospital or contracted out. Most are operated by the upper tier. which means all of our employees are Almonte General Hospital employees, and I report directly to the CEO of the hospital. County Council, in its mandate, approves the annual budget, collective bargaining, response time plan, and any service enhancements outside of the budget as well. And then we attempt quarterly to do regular volume and activity updates throughout the year. We have 5 bases located throughout the county. You can see them here on the screen. And we also are currently, and I'll touch on it a little later in the presentation, leasing some space in Smith Falls for our community paramedics to operate out of, because they've required some extra space beyond the needs of what we have at our bases. The fleet for the paramedic service consists of 13 ambulances. Each ambulance is staffed by 2 paramedics. They respond to emergencies and have the ability, obviously, with the ambulance to transport patients. We also run several emergency response vehicles, so that you can see that in the picture at the bottom. These are staffed by a single paramedic. They get to scene usually first, start treatment, and then an ambulance, if required, will still come afterwards to continue care and transportation. And then we have 3 administration vehicles for moving stuff around the county, delivering stock, and also responding to scenes ourselves in command capacity if need be for a big incident. You can see by the stats there that we put on about 1 million kilometers a year between our fleet. We do attempt to replace vehicles at 5-year intervals, but as you can imagine, there have been some supply chain issues with vehicles, and so it's getting harder and harder to secure them. So it requires a little more planning up front to keep our vehicle being replaced on regular maintenance schedules. So currently we have a few vehicles that are over the 5-year mark and well over the 400,000 kilometer milestone. However, we just received a few Fridays ago 3 of our newest additions to the fleet. So hopefully we'll be able to transfer those out and move them either into mechanical spares or off the road completely as we cycle through the fleet. This is the workshop that you'll see of the paramedics, the back of the ambulance. We essentially try to stock 2 of almost every piece of equipment in the ambulance, except some of our main pieces, which are the defibrillator, cardiac monitor piece that you see on that pole, and the stretcher itself. The reason for this is we don't always get back to base between calls, so we have the ability to be able to respond to multiple calls or those calls where we have more than 1 patient at a time. A 2-person crew can carry upwards of 168 pounds of equipment, depending on the scene, if you count the stretcher and some of the bags that they go into. And then once you put a patient on that stretcher, you're upwards of 300 pounds per call. And you can imagine that they have to move those patients sometimes multiple times in a call to and from the ambulance in a hospital. Our full fleet, however, is outfitted with these power stretchers and power load systems. And we started that back around, I believe it was 2015 or 17, and now the entire fleet has them. And this saves the paramedics quite a bit of lifting and has reduced our back injuries for stretcher lifting to 0 since we've got them. So it's now become a standard piece of equipment, and a lot of staff can't imagine the days where they didn't have these. This is just a little snapshot in time showing you some of the call volume that the paramedics in Lanark County respond to. So if you look down in the bottom right, we broke 28,000 calls in 2022. And just for a little piece of information, back in 2010, the call volume was about 13,000. So that's an increase of 114%, or about 9% a year over the last 13 years. And this doesn't include what I'll get to in a couple slides, our community paramedicine numbers. So the service is getting busier, as both Carrie alluded to earlier, with the aging population, with wait lists. We are seeing the same patients with multiple more comorbidities out in the community. And most of our call volume consists of patients 51% and older, or age 51 and older, over 80% of our calls. The priorities at the top of the screen, for those of you that might not be aware, priority 1, that's a low priority call. We get to those patients when we can. That could be people calling 911 for not critical situations, such as, the infamous stub toe or something to that effect. Priority 4 calls, though, however, are our life-threatening emergencies, our lights and sirens calls. And then priority 8 that you see in that last column, those are what we call standbys. So because we're positioned throughout the county in basically the different towns, if one town depletes its ambulances due to calls or having to go on transfers or taking patients to the city that require tertiary care, we do move our resources around to cover off. So you'll often see ambulances sitting at Port Elmsley to cover both Perth and Smith Falls, or halfway between Carleton Place and Almont, or Franktown. So we do that so that we have that equitable coverage throughout the county as our resource numbers go down and down due to the call volume until we get everybody back, and then everybody goes back to their home bases in their towns. The staffing of the paramedic service consists of myself, a deputy chief. We have a commander of operations and 5 superintendents who provide the 24-hour support to our staff. We also have 2 support staff, and our paramedics are almost evenly split between our full-time and part-time paramedics. We have 51 full-time positions staffing the county 24/7, and those are made up of advanced care paramedics and primary care paramedics, which I'll cover the differences shortly. Since about 2018, 2019, the county approved moving towards a 50-50 model, where we will endeavor to try to have an ambulance staffed with 1 advanced care paramedic and 1 primary care paramedic, so that we have both of those scopes and skill sets, very similar to what Carrie was talking about earlier, covered off in the ambulance. We're moving through it gradually through attrition and through enhancements to the service. And right now we have about 9 active advanced care paramedics, with another 5 at different stages of completing their certification. For those of you that aren't aware, to become a primary care paramedic, students complete a 2-year college diploma program. And basically we become specialists in certain areas, but generalists in all sort of pre-hospital emergency medical and trauma care. And what I mean by generalists is one day we could be treating somebody with an asthma exacerbation, and the next day we could be delivering a baby and dealing with a newborn or a neonate. So you have to have that full spectrum. And you can see that their training includes quite a substantial number of hours of practical experience. And then there's many, many hoops for them to jump through before they can as a paramedic on the road. They have to get through the college program itself, which has about a 50% attrition rate. They have to pass a ministry exam. They have to be certified under a base hospital. And this is where we get our medical delegation from. So our standing orders, our protocols, what things we're able to do outside of hospital care. And then to become an advanced care paramedic, they actually go back to school for yet a further year and another many hours of clinical ride out and comprehensive examinations before they can practice at that higher skill set. To give you an idea of the difference between the 2 scopes of paramedic we have in Lanark County, this chart, and I won't read the full thing for you, kind of outlines some of the differences I just spoke about, but you can see at the bottom, being able to administer a decent amount more medication and do more controlled medical acts. One point of pride for paramedics would be the bullet at the bottom, where paramedics in Ontario perform more delegated medical acts than any other healthcare profession other than a physician. So outside of the hospital, they are your medical professionals that can actually do quite a few, I'll say, interventions that would normally only be seen in the hospital. So what we try to do in the pre-hospital setting is when needed, bring that emergency room to the patient and try to stabilize them before transport. Another piece that I'll touch on with this slide very briefly, Lanark County Paramedic Service took the initiative a few years ago to take our primary care paramedics and augment their skill set even further, where they have what's called autonomous IV. So this allows them to do intravenous interventions in the field and gives them an expanded skill set to be able to treat a broader spectrum of patients. And we're one of the first services in the East to have all our full-time primary care paramedics trained up to this skill set. And that's been in collaboration with both our base hospital, but also our local hospitals. So Perth, Smith Falls, Emerge, and Almont and Carleton Place have allowed us to send our paramedics into their ORs to do their training and practice this skill set before they bring it out onto the road. So it's been a very successful endeavor, and we're finding through our recruitment that it's one of the draws of new paramedics wanting to come to work to Lanark County as well, because they know they can get this expanded skill set that we offer and train up in-house. A little bit of how the 911 system works for the paramedic service. All of our crews are dispatched out of Kingston Dispatch, which is responsible for a huge swath of area. There are actually 5 or 6 services under Kingston Dispatch, and Lanark County is one of them. When we do, however, travel into other jurisdictions, such as Renfrew, Ottawa, we do switch over to their dispatch system. All of our vehicles are equipped with GPS and can be tracked by dispatch. And because of the rules and regulations on how 911 calls come in, the 911 calls must be dispatched to our ambulances within 45 seconds from when that call is received. And then we have our local response times for how fast we're endeavoring to get to those calls. 99.9% of the time, the closest vehicle to a scene of a call must attend. And this is where we get into the situations where Lanark County may have a closer ambulance to a patient in Leeds, Grenville, Frontenac, Renfrew, or Ottawa. So you do see us end up doing those calls, and vice versa. And then one exception to from transporting to the closest hospitals are for our very critical patients. So our strokes, our STEMI patients, which are your serious heart attacks, and our trauma patients typically bypass to either Kingston or Ottawa so that they can go straight to the definitive care center. So I touched on it briefly a few minutes ago about our community paramedicine program, and Carrie was nice enough to mention it earlier in her presentation. This is a new model of care for paramedics that has evolved over the past few years and was really emphasized during the pandemic. And it's allowing paramedics to operate in expanded scopes and roles outside of our traditional 911 response. So becoming more healthcare practitioners in the field and being that link to pre-hospital care with primary care through home visits, interventions. We do wellness clinics. And what this basically does is, instead of being reactive for when someone is in an emergency, we're trying to do more of the proactive care and approach, that upstream thing, where, for example, it would be seen a lot to fire prevention or community policing. And what this does is it allows us to start treating people in their homes sooner, before they get to that point where they really need to call 911, and allows us to, in most cases, divert calls from clogging up the emergency room, or even better, providing that care to the patients before they get acute so that they don't actually deteriorate to the point where they need us in a true medical emergency. This again has been another collaborative approach where the paramedics, being very nimble and mobile with their ability to be out in the community, have filled a niche where we can connect those patients again with primary care, their physicians. We can also provide interventions in the field, such as blood draws, urinalysis, a lot of diagnostic things, which allows the patient to stay in their home and saves those trips even for them to try to get into a clinic where they need to get this stuff done. We relay this information back straight to their primary care physicians, and a lot of the time this will allow us to make a medication change or do an intervention where we can catch something a little early on in its process before it becomes, like I said, a need to call 911. We also do remote patient monitoring, where we've set up equipment in patients' houses that allow them to upload and take their vital signs and different diagnostics, and we can trend that over time, and an alert will be sent to the paramedic if something is out of whack, and they will then initiate either a phone call or a home visit to again check on this patient before things get to the point of needing to call 911. Just at a glance, in 2022, we've had 370 new patients enrolled, over 3,500 visits completed. And like I said earlier, a lot of these have prevented 911 calls. So when I said earlier, we broke 28,000 calls this year, that's not including that. So that could have been a lot higher had we not had community paramedicine out there doing what it does. And then of course, some of the assessments also, we were very active during COVID and even now with vaccines and in-home blood draws. A little bit about how this community paramedicine program is funded. Currently, they're operating as pilot projects, and these are being 100% funded by the province. So this doesn't come out of the municipal budget. We have two pilots, one which has been renewing yearly, the first one, and it actually expired March 31st. However, we've been getting tidbits of news that this will be renewed for another year. So we're just holding tight on that to continue that program. And then the big pilot that will be ending next year is our Ministry of Long-Term Care pilot. And it was again for patients who are on the wait list for long-term care or soon to be eligible, to try again to treat them in their home and fill that gap from people deteriorating during their wait list to actually getting into long-term care. And as Carrie mentioned earlier, the trend that they're seeing with patients having more serious illnesses by the time they get into long-term care, both speaks to the need for this community paramedicine model, but hopefully what we'll see over time would be that if these interventions are working with these patients who are awaiting long-term care, that maybe by the time they get there, they're in a better state than they would have been had we not had this program in place. The hope is that as these pilots end, that the province will continue these as a permanent funding model at the 100% funded capacity, which is great news for us. You can see over year, the number of referrals that continue to spike, that top green line being 2022. So as we collaborate more with healthcare, public health, the hospital discharge nurses, LHINs, home and community support, and the program gets more and more traction and awareness, we're seeing the number of referrals go through the roof for the need for paramedics to go in and do some assessments and interventions for patients in their homes. And this should, in theory, be helping with the whole hallway medicine piece as well, where patients that don't need to go to emerge or can be treated in the right place, which for most people, they would want that to be their home, will lead to giving more capacity to hopefully the hospital system down the road as well. I'm not going to read all these out, but I will leave the slide up for a few seconds for you to read a few of the comments we've received about the community paramedicine program. And then lastly, I just want to highlight some of the community involvement that the paramedics partake in, such as school visits, touch a truck events. Annually, we do our Lanark County food drive, and there's many more that I obviously wasn't able to fit on the slide. But we do this in an effort not only to give back to the community, but also to raise the public profile about the paramedics, what they do, and get some visibility out in the community. And I will stop sharing, see if you guys have any questions.
Thank you for your presentation. Councillor McKenna.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Chief. That again, I've seen some of these slides and they continue to impress me. I really appreciate the data that you provide. It helps make sense, and for the public and for municipal leaders to understand where their dollars and resources are going. I guess my comment, it relates not just to your presentation, but to social services, long-term care, and I'm going to include Lanark County Interval House. Unfortunately, when municipal or provincial or federal decision makers make a mistake and they spend the taxpayers' money foolishly, it gets broadcast and people, shake their head and say, why am I paying taxes? And where I'm reassured is when people like you, Chief, and social services and long-term care and Lanark County Interval House come in and people can see where their taxpayers' dollars are going. I'm pleased to be able to pay my taxes and get the kind of services that you and your colleagues in Interval House are delivering, and the housing services that we desperately need. So I'm fortunate and I'm proud to pay my taxes, especially when they go to the kind of services that you and your colleagues have provided. So I just want the public to understand that when you get your tax bill, these are the kind of services that you're getting, let alone water and garbage and all those other important. They're not being squandered. These are put to wonderful use and life-saving use. So I want to thank you, and I hope the public takes that message and sees the kind of quality services that we're able to deliver in Smiths Falls and Lanark County. So thank you.
Anyone else? Councillor Quinn.
Thank you, Travis. That was a great presentation. It's good to know all the facilities that we do have. I mean, we know what we have right here in Smiths Falls, but now you've brought all of it together for us to see. But I really do have to commend the paramedics for working so hard and going to people's homes and able to keep them out of the hospitals. Like you said, calming the situation down, being there for them. And sometimes it's not much that they need, just that hand, somebody to say, we're here, we know that you have an issue and we're going to help you. And that's wonderful, because our hospitals are filled to capacity, and now you're helping them right at home, and then they can stay there where they're comfortable. So I really want to commend you on that. I think that's excellent. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councillor Brennan.
Yeah, thanks, Chief. I mean, that was just a great presentation, and just to echo Councillor McKenna, this is the type of service, I think it's the gold standard, and you're actually being proactive with the community paramedicine long-term care project. I mean, that I didn't know about that, so thank you for that. My question, I guess I have, is and this has been I've heard about this before, your calls for service in the county. Do you have calls for service outside of the county, i.e. Ottawa or Leeds Grenville, that you of course will respond to?
Thanks for the question, and through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we respond to a fair number of calls actually in both Leeds, Grenville, and Ottawa primarily, and then a fewer amount in Renfrew and Ottawa. But all of those services do reciprocate to an extent when they can. And with 3 out of 4 of them, we have cross-border agreements with the county. where there is actually a monetary reconciliation that happens to cover some of those. So it all depends too on, again, the way the ministry works with the seamless response to where the closest ambulance is. So one of the things with our base in Montague being right on the border, we tend to have a catchment area that not only covers in Lanark County, but basically you can picture a diameter or a circle around that area where we will be closer to some of the calls in Leeds Grenville. And conversely, Frontenac has a base up in Robertsville that tends to cover into some of our area with first response. So a lot of it is geographic positioning, but yes, we do respond, to answer your question, to calls in other areas for sure.
Okay, through the chair, thanks for that. And of course, you would. And from what I see, you've done a great job. So thanks for coming. And all of the county presentations tonight have been really informative. For me, actually, as a veteran counselor, but for the new counselors, and I'm sure the mayor and Councillor McKenna and Councillor McGuire would agree, it was a great education. So thanks so much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Anyone else? Okay. Well, I'd like to thank you very much for your presentation. It was very informative for me. And I don't think that I can add anything to what Councillor McKenna, Councillor Quinn, and Councillor Brennan said that hasn't already been said. So thank you very much.
All right. Have a good evening, everyone.
All right. So we've got our last delegation. It's the Executive Director of the Lanark County Interval House and Community Support Programs and Services and Intimate Partner Violence, Erin Lee. Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you very much, Chair Robinson, Mayor Panko, and members of council. It's not often that I feel fortunate to be last in a delegation. Tonight is an exception. We work very closely with the paramedics program with the County of Lanark. We work very, very close with the Lodge. And so I am honored and feel very fortunate to come before you this evening just to share a little bit of information about the agency, but more specifically about the resolution that came before County Council in December of 2022. Thank you, Carrie, for managing my slides, and you can certainly move forward to the next slide. For many of you, it may be your first time engaging with me as new members of council. I have been around your county for a very long time, and our agency has made several efforts to ensure that we have relationships with our local municipal counties, councils, and that they know what's going on. This slide really is to let you know that there are lots of services that are offered by your only dedicated anti-violence agency in Smiths Falls and the County of Lanark. We run a 15-bed shelter. We offer a 24-hour-a-day crisis line. We respond to violence that impacts women and their children and youth who are fragile, who are vulnerable, and who may need safe shelter, who may need counseling, who may need advocacy, who may need system navigation, who may need an assortment of supports covering the realm of domestic violence, sexual assault, human trafficking, and certainly violence perpetrated against adults towards children. We have several programs that you can see us on social media and on all the socials and on our website. New to us since the onset, basically, or just before the onset of COVID, is our second stage housing. And we have 4 second stage housing units that are provided for families to stay for a period of up to 18 months to navigate healing and look at how to live a life free from violence moving forward. We have now a beyond second stage program where we have 6 housing units in Perth that are for women who need a place to land and who have maybe navigated and are feeling healthier, but they need a place to land in order to plan what the steps look like moving forward. We employed a housing advocate role to work alongside and in partnership with many housing providers like the county and like CareBridge during COVID. And during COVID-19, at the largest percentage of time, we were very fortunate to lean on each other in community. And often I would call Travis and ask him to lend us a hand with a situation at the shelter in COVID. And that was never an issue. We've launched a new program called the Perseverance Pantry, which is to really speak to the fact that we know that hunger stops and food banks are facing lots of pressure, and we know that those living in community need a little support and perseverance. So we do every 2 weeks Perseverance Pantry for eligible clients who are living in the community who can access some extra food to help them get through what they're trying to persevere through. And of course, we have our As Good as New store and our Suit Yourself program. The Suit Yourself program is new and is launching in our community in the next month. And it's really about readiness for employment. It's about building self-esteem, empowering folks, styling, and preparing for court and navigation of the court system and all of those types of things. As an agency, we've been in your community. You can forward the slide, Carrie, please. We've been in your community for a very, very long time. And these stats really just speak to some of our realities in terms of the number of crisis calls, the total number of women and children served, and the number of shelter residents. As you can see, we had 4,815 crisis calls in 2021. 21-22, we've seen a slight decrease in the number of crisis calls, but overall, between before COVID and now, we've seen about a 32% consistency of increased crisis calls to our line, which means that those crisis calls are people in our community, and approximately 93% of the calls that come to our agency represent and reflect the town of Smiths Falls and the county of Lanark, which is quite a good it's a good thing to be able to report that local folks are calling local and getting the support we need. You can forward the slide, Carrie. As most of you may know, we had an unfortunate triple femicide in 2015 in our neighboring county, Renfrew County. And at the time, we were very engaged as neighbors to make sure that we were providing support. And what we recognized, and some of you may remember back in 2015, that I kept saying to communities and to municipal councils, you know, today it's them, tomorrow it's us. We are not much different geographically and service linked in terms of the potential for a femicide situation to arise, similar to what happened to Carol Culleton, Anastasia Kuzak, and Natalie Warmerdam. At the time in 2015, we also saw a huge increase in rural Eastern Ontario, and we saw murder-suicide in Mississippi Mills. We saw a femicide in Smiths Falls. We've seen a femicide since then, and continue to work alongside our towns to make sure that services are provided and that we really work hard to eliminate gender-based violence in our communities. We launched 3 years ago a program alongside the OPP. We are working more closely now to make sure that that program is extended in the town of Smiths Falls, called the Victim Advocate Program, so that the OPP and our victim advocates respond together and get notifications so that our victim advocates can help victims experience the system better so that we can see better outcomes. In June of 2022, there was an inquest called in Renfrew County. I was your inquest voice, your representative. I was part of the inquest working group, and then I gave testimony on the rural realities of gender-based violence, intimate partner violence in rural communities. You can forward the slide, please, Carrie. As a result of all the murders in Eastern Ontario in 2015-16, which were 7 murders, we launched a campaign called the See It, Name It, Change It campaign, with the idea that, you know, when we were kids and we went to school, we learned that if there's a fire, we should stop, drop, and roll. And, you know, if we give ourselves permission to, if we see violence and we name violence, that we can change violence, maybe we'll actually start to dialogue and educate each other and the general public in terms of empowering each other to know, what do we do when we see violence? How do we name it safely? And then what do we do to change it? That all happened. And it's been a very exciting campaign that's kind of resurfaced, and people are really embracing that. You can forward the slide, Carrie, please. And it's been a really good opportunity for us to dialogue. After the inquest, the jury, who were just, really, they were members of the community who are our jury members. Those jury members made 86 recommendations. And recommendation number 1 was for Ontario to declare intimate partner violence an epidemic. And in June of 2022, that did not happen by the province of Ontario. And I can report to you today, April the 24th, that still has not happened in the province of Ontario. But what happened is rural communities started gathering and started having conversations. And December 6th, which you may know, is the Day of Remembrance and Action and Honor as a result of the Montreal Massacre that happened in 1989. Last December 6th, I decided that I knew I was going to County Council, and I decided that evening that I was going to ask Council if they were prepared to make that declaration and that resolution to lead the province, to lead the country in declaring the realities of intimate partner violence that we knew about. And much to my surprise, even though I shouldn't be surprised, Councillor McKenna was there that night, and we had a really good dialogue at Council on December the 7th, and I proposed the resolution. The resolution was passed unanimously by County Council to make that declaration. I know how things work in municipal politics, and I knew it had to come back to the committee of the whole, and I recognized that things could change, and we talked about the realities and the fact that I have been going to county council and different municipal councils for the last 16 years in this area to talk about the realities of what's happening in our community and what can we do together. And I will say that I have never been disappointed that local politicians, whether in the smaller towns or as a county, have always been interested in how to affect violence in communities. So they took the resolution and said that they supported it, and then we came back, and you could forward the slide, please, Carrie. We came back and I was asked to come forward and speak to the warden on December, I think it was the 14th. And he said that there were some amendments that they wanted to propose. As an advocate and as a person who's been a provincial advocate for the greater part of 32 years, I was nervous about amendments. As you know, amendments can make your resolution go away. The warden's presentation was, can we take the resolution and can we add that we want to share with all 444 municipalities in Ontario what we have done? And I said, I would see that as a friendly amendment. And then they said, could we, as another amendment, share with Roma and other related rural conferences this resolution as something to be discussed, and perhaps lead the way in that way. And I said that I accepted that as also as a friendly amendment. And the last was, could we get a list formulated of specific provincial and federal ministers that we should be sharing this resolution that Lanark County has made, so that this can carry some weight and move us forward? And I said yes. And then I said, in my 32 career, those are the most friendly resolution amendments I've ever heard. And then it also passed unanimously. And the original resolution says, be it resolved that Lanark County Council recognizes the issues of violence in rural communities as serious to the health and wellness of local communities. Being further resolved that the Lanark County Council recognizes the rural Renfrew County inquest as important to all rural communities. Based on the statistics, as is also in your PowerPoint, of 4,815 crisis calls and service provision to 527 women and children in our local community, the Lanark County Council declares intimate partner violence, violence against women, an epidemic as per recommendation number 1 of the Renfrew County jury recommendations. It passed unanimously, and I thought we were the first county in the province. Looks like we might have actually been the first county in Canada to make the declaration. Since then, there has been huge uptake. Renfrew County has passed it. The City of Ottawa passed it on International Women's Day. We have various counties across the province who are passing it. Unfortunately, some jurisdictions have taken it word for word and cut and paste, and so they have our stats in their resolution, which doesn't always please people, but it's been passed, and the momentum has been quite overwhelming. And in Lanark County, in the town of Smiths Falls, what's happened is individual municipalities like Mississippi Mills, Carleton Place, Lanark Highlands have all decided to do their own resolution locally in support of the county-wide resolution. In addition to that, in case you didn't know, the County Council pushed for a delegation at Roma in January in 2023, and I went accompanied by 10 or so members of Lanark County Council to meet with the ministers, the Associate Minister Williams, and at the time the MCC Minister Marilee Fullerton, who has since resigned. And I think that the county and the town of Smiths Falls has just always been really supportive. So why am I telling you this? Really, what does it have to do with you now? If you could forward the slide, please, Carrie. I think that other communities should continue to endorse this. And why do I think that? I think that endorsing recognizes the impact of the issue of violence in our rural community. I think it aligns and provides pressure to the province to make changes and to allocate funding. In our province, we're currently federally in the country negotiating the National Action Plan to end gender-based violence. And I don't know that Ontario has been invited, that anyone across Ontario has been invited to talk about that negotiation with Canada. I think it speaks to the inquest and the power of the 86 recommendations. It's the first time in 20 years there's been an inquest, and it's the very first time that there's ever been an inquest that actually focused on rural realities. It speaks to local leadership of anti-violence communities in and around our county, our country, and our region. And I think it's really important that Smiths Falls think about that in terms of the level of violence that's happened in Smiths Falls, the action that Smiths Falls has taken, unfortunately a recent femicide, and the fact that in the month of May, Sexual Assault Awareness Month, that Smiths Falls will have a banner saying, you know, we stand with survivors, and we're unveiling a mosaic in the town of Smiths Falls, in the new town square, that speaks to the issues of gender-based violence. You could forward the slide, please, Carrie. Since then, I've talked about, obviously, many panels and many things that have happened. One of the things I want you to know is that I am now your provincial representative, and I have been appointed as our provincial representative on the Ontario Domestic Violence Death Review Committee. I am the first rural representative that will be on this Domestic Violence Review Committee, which means that I work with 14 others to review every murder and femicide that happens as a result of gender-based violence, to look at what were the circumstances, what were the environment, and what are the suggestions we can make to the province, to the country, and to local municipalities to not allow those environments and those circumstances to exist again. I've been appointed for a 2-year term, and I will honor that 2-year term and represent rural issues in Lanark County and the town of Smiths Falls proudly. You could advance the screen, please.
That's the end of the presentation, Aaron.
I thought it said questions in my ask, but I guess it doesn't. Maybe I have no ask. I guess what I want to say to council is, I really appreciate that it was council that came to me and said, it was Councillor Miller who said, we know that this is going on. can you come and speak to our counselor? It was Counselor McKenna who, I don't want to embarrass or highlight in any kind of way. He has been a strong and formidable voice at the county level and every aspect of issues related to gender-based violence. And I have to commend his efforts. And Mayor Panko is there every step of the way. I know we were talking about historical council members. Councillor Brennan has always been someone who's supportive. And I think that, for the town of Smiths Falls and for Lanark County, for the little pieces of the world that we represent, there is a lot of community will, there is a lot of power, and there's a lot of sharing of that wealth and that wisdom to make a difference in our community. So I would, my ask would be for the town of Smiths Falls and for the council to pass the resolution and recognize that intimate partner violence is an epidemic.
Well, thank you. Before I open the floor, thank you very much for your presentation and the very important work that you do. Councillor Miller, you had your hand up?
Thank you. So thanks for coming, Aaron. As always, you're an inspirational speaker. And I was just reflecting back on your Violet Femmes Gala in November. And I was shaken to the core by something you said, and it hasn't left my mind. And I've seen you since, and I told you the 52 women in 52 weeks that we have lost to intimate partner violence. And it's a really hard thing to even say out loud. So thank you for your good work. I'm really thrilled that you were appointed to that important role on our behalf. Our council took a small step forward recently and endorsed Bill 5 about workplace violence and harassment. So I'm very proud that I work with these great colleagues, and I would encourage them this evening to support your ask and that we pass a resolution to support this as well. So thank you again, Aaron.
If I may through the chair.
Sure.
I just wanted to let you know, thank you, Councillor Miller, for your comments. In the month of March in 2023, there were 3 femicides in Ontario. 2 of those femicides were rural. Of the 52 in 2022, 17% of those femicides were rural. It's increasing in rural communities. I do believe it's an epidemic. My thanks to the chair.
Mayor Panko?
Yeah, thanks, Aaron, and thank you, Councillor Miller, for inviting you today and helping put this issue and this opportunity in front of us. So I agree completely with your recommendation. And I was preparing for tomorrow's Police Service Board meeting. Our chief is doing his annual report. And in 2022, we saw a 40% increase in the number of intimate partner violence calls in Smiths Falls, from 120 to 170. So it's shocking. There's no question that it is an epidemic. And I think it's important that we not just adopt this resolution, tailor it to our community, be blunt and be open about it. But the other thing, Aaron, I guess is it's one thing to make a statement, but how do you change it? What is, I mean, it's the I know it's your life's work, but and you're providing incredible support and help and guidance and safety to our women and our children, but it's the men that have to change. And how do you go upstream and try to ensure that this epidemic is someday completely over and the world is completely free of the issues that confront women today and have haunted women for since the dawn of time, probably. And of course, recognizing Christmas of 2021 when Chantal Lebrun was killed, and so it hits hard in our community, and it seems like such a complex and difficult situation or challenge to resolve.
If I may, through the chair, That is a thank you, Mayor Panko. It is a huge question. I think it starts with our leadership. I think it's things like the Mosaic, where we're creating an opportunity to speak publicly. I think it's having a banner in May in Sexual Assault Awareness Month. I think it's working closely with our justice partners to ensure that there is accountability around violence in relationships, and that we're not seeing rural communities that are not following through, or where justice partners are releasing perpetrators for the 10th, 11th, 12th time. And I think we also have to recognize that all parts of our community need to heal. And I think we need to be looking at perpetrators through a lens where we're looking at how do we lend support to perpetrators? How do we encourage and not shame people? If a perpetrator comes forward and says, I think that's me, from the see it, name it, change it context, if you see it and you name it, and someone says, I see it in myself, I name it, I think I do that we don't say shame on you. We say, wow, it's really great that you're talking about it. How can we support you to make that different? How can we support you to make different choices? How do we support and augment and expand the choices that victims can make around their situations? We can't forget the complexity and the intersections of housing and poverty and employment and education as they intersect in the issues of intimate partner violence. But what we can do is acknowledge those things. We need to be speaking about it in schools. We need to have it in curriculum. We need to tell teachers if they see something at the school that they also need to name it. We need to empower people to not be afraid or to feel like it is shameful to speak about violence. It is a shame to ignore violence. It is a shame to have somebody exposed to violence and feel like 14 people saw me in the grocery store and nobody lent a hand and nobody spoke up. And how do we empower, give people tools so that they can distract in a grocery store, drop something? Better to break a jar of pickles, although the independent grocer might not like it, and better to drop and distract in a situation, because that might change the situation, right? Document, direct. There's a lot of work, Mayor Panko, that I think we can continue to do to empower each other, to feel like we have a responsibility and a role, right? When we pass, people always ask me, what does it mean if we pass the resolution, right? It means that you're validating those 4,815 people in your county that call us. You're validating their experience and you're saying, we believe you and we want this to change in our community. Thank you, Chair. I'll stop there.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thanks. Anyone else? Well, I too would endorse town doing our own recommendation based on local stats, and we will be bringing that forward in just a few minutes. So if there's no other questions, thank you very much for your presentation. It was very informative. All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Adoption of minutes. I have a recommended motion that the minutes of the April 11th, 2023 Committee of the Whole be received and filed. Moved by Councillor Brennan, seconded by Councillor Quinn. All in favor? That's done. All right, CAO or Director's Reports. I believe we have two reports, one with Manager Crowder. You got a report?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. A few just quick updates for council this evening. This week marks National Tourism Week, and I thought it'd be a good opportunity to give council and the community a quick update on tourism activities. Currently, we're working on a new tourism map. The map will replace the current guide. This is in response to how visitors are planning their trips, leaning more toward online research, which can be found on our new website, as well as a number of requests received for a local map from visitors. The map will allow the town to produce a product that can be used year over year without being changed every year, reducing production and printing costs and getting more prints for the same price, which provides the ability for us to distribute further and purchase new and more digital marketing opportunities to connect and invite visitors to the community. Key tourism information and activities noted in the guide will be included on the reverse side of the map, and map will highlight visitor assets like parking, washrooms, local attractions and amenities, and downtown core offerings. Links to push visitors to the new website will also be included, like the visitor calendar and the business directory and other information to plan their trip or to view once they arrive. Staff are also in the process of finalizing the 2022 visitor information collection report that will come to council at an upcoming meeting, and working on launching this year's contest and survey. The report will capture feedback, demographics, and trip data from visitors to help us plan, develop visitor offerings, services, and assets, as well as effective marketing materials. Staff are also working with the Chamber of Commerce on a boater attraction campaign, as well as investing in a number of other print and digital promotion opportunities. We are also currently managing a number of special event and festival applications that will be hosted all over town, and starting to plan for this year's Canada Day celebrations, as well as many events and activities hosted at the Heritage House Museum. So it's shaping up to be a busy and fun-filled year in Smith Falls. Last week, nominations opened for the Smith Falls Community Awards. These awards celebrate and honor local volunteers and outstanding community members that exemplify good citizenship and support quality of life in our community. Nominations can be submitted for the Gilhooly Award, Municipal Volunteer Award, Good Neighbor Award, and the Brooke and Brittany Youth Award. Award eligibility and nomination forms are available on the town's website, or in hard copy can be picked up at Town Hall or at the Community Center. We encourage residents to review the awards info and to nominate a deserving community member this year. Nominations deadline is May 5th. And an awards ceremony will be hosted on May 18th to announce the award recipients. And one last thing, on Saturday, the town celebrated Earth Day through an event at Heritage House Museum. Staff put on a great community event that was attended by about 120 guests. So thank you to museum staff and volunteers who planned and ran a successful Saturday event. And that's my update.
Well, thank you. Anybody got any comments? No? Okay, we'll move on to Senior Planner Grenke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evening. Two very quick updates from planning. Firstly, I'm pleased to inform committee that site plan approval has been given for 2 new restaurants with drive-throughs located at 143 Lombard Street across from the Starbucks. This forms the first phase of a corridor commercial development being undertaken by the Otis Group at this location. Council will recall that last year, changes to the Planning Act resulted in statutory requirement for site plan approvals to be completed at the staff level, whereas previously larger site plans were presented to Council for approval. As committed to last year, staff are advising Council of approvals for larger projects or projects of particular community interest. Pending the issuance of a building permit, we expect this construction to be underway shortly. My second update relates to the provincial planning policy framework as a whole. On April 6th, the province released a draft new provincial policy statement, which is an important but high-level policy document that identifies and gives direction on matters of provincial interest as it relates to land use planning, and it guides any municipal decision on infrastructure, development, and planning. While the PPS normally updates on a cycle of 5 to 10 years, which allows us to customize our own OP adoption, the proposed new PPS would replace the one that only came into effect in February 2020. Staff are in the process of reviewing the changes and assessing their impacts as it relates to our town. We do expect this will impact our upcoming official plan update and some of the decisions that Council will be asked to make through that process. The province has opened comments on the new PPS through June 5th, and in the coming weeks, staff will bring forward a more detailed report and will give Council the opportunity to consider a municipal response, similar as we did when Bill 23 was presented in November. At this point, we're advising Council of the new draft PPS, and that we will be back in a couple of weeks with a report and some additional information. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any comments? Okay. Oh, Councillor McKenna.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senior Planner Grenke, the site plan for Lombard the drive-through restaurants, as everyone sees the activity going on there. Could you just comment on the site plan? Is the Cataract Way Trail still going to end there, or will it be, as part of that site plan, moved to, is there an alternate being considered, or is that where it will end up, and what will it look like at the end of the day?
Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Councillor, and certainly that is a key part of the Cataract Way Trail has been a key part of the conversations we've had about through this project as it's gone through the Planning Advisory Committee. The stretch of the former, I believe, rail allowance that connects to the Dollarama Plaza is on public property. On private property. The Cataract Way Trail, the marked portion of the trail extends along behind the Ferreira businesses, and then loops, the Lombard businesses, and then loops up around and follows the Ferreira Drive. However, through the site plan process for this phase and future phases, we are working with the developers to ensure that an access to the trail and pedestrian cyclist connectivity through that site is maintained. Certainly, it is in the community's interest as well as I would suspect the developers' interest to ensure that that broader connectivity between the trail and customers and residents is maintained. But we expect it through the second phase that will be addressed in a more granular detail, since that would be affecting that part of the landscape. But in the first phase, I don't believe the trail is proposed to be realigned from where it is right now.
Thank you. I knew you would be on top of that one.
And Councillor Quinn.
Thank you. That was a really good question, Peter, and that leads me into that we need a trailhead for the Cataract Way Trail here in Smith Falls. So now's maybe time to be thinking about getting that done. It would just set everything off in that area wonderfully. So I think we should keep that on the radar for sure. Thank you.
Thanks. Actually, I was thinking exactly what you were talking about, Councillor McKenna. I drove through that area today, and it looked to me like the trail portion was way back. They had clear cut a whole bunch of property there, and it was blocked off at the far end. So thanks for asking that, Councillor McKenna. Anything else? Okay. Well, thank you. Correspondence items. So 6.1, I assume that there is interest in Council down in Smith Falls supporting the intimate partner violence and violence against women as an epidemic. So do you want to have more discussion on that, or Councillor Miller?
I certainly support that. I think the comments earlier about having a draft resolution come back with our own statistics in it would be wise. And it sounds like there's some statistics that we can pull from our police department's annual report. So perhaps we could provide direction to Clerk Costello to bring that back for us to review.
Okay. Everybody in favor of that? Okay, so that's what we'll do. Next correspondence item is a letter from the Friends of Cataract Way Trail inviting council to appoint a representative to the Cataract Way Board of Directors. Any discussion about that? Councillor Quinn.
Thank you. I would be more than happy to be a representative on the Cataract Way Trail. I was before when I was on council and thoroughly enjoyed it. And I know that the trail's doing a lot of work, and I think it's something important that we need to be part of. And like I just made the comment, you know what, now's time to do a nice trailhead there, and then we learn how to join all the trails together so that it is part of our community.
Okay. Councillor Miller.
Just wanted to, it just reminded me, of course, the trailhead is a strategic priority, and I know we're waiting on the final draft of our strat plan, but certainly it'll be good to see that tie up on our list of what needs to be done soon.
Agreed. So that's something that we should be putting into a priority issue for moving to council. CAO Morris.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so Councillor Miller is quite right. Within the one of the strategic priorities that council chose, we have the trail networks. So we are working in a more granular detail right now to bring that back to you in a more polished way. And I can assure you the trailhead matter and connecting the trail networks will be front and center within that priority.
Okay. Councillor Brennan, did you have a comment?
No, I just think that Councillor Quinn's an excellent choice to fulfill that role.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Thank you.
You're going to be our representative. All right. And then the last one was just for information only. It's CPR's vegetation control program, which will take place throughout the spring and into the summer. So we have no in-camera issues. So before we start on the priority issues, Councillor McGuire had requested at the beginning of the meeting that the draft signed bylaw report be put aside for this evening because Municipal Heritage Committee was meeting for the first time. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So if the committee could have a chance to review that, then we could get those comments and have a more complete report when it comes to committee of the whole.
Councillor McKenna?
I would support Councillor McGuire's suggestion. I don't think this is time sensitive and we'll get it back soon enough. I'd like to see the input.
Okay. So Councillor Quinn?
Yes, thank you. I agree with what Councillor McGuire is saying, and I'm wondering, the business community, have they seen any of this? Because I know I'm a member of the Downtown Business Association, and we just got notice of the sign bylaw just last week. So I don't think anybody's had a chance to have a look at it. And it might be really a good thing to bring, their comments forward, see what they have to say, and at least, and to do with the sign and the patio bylaw both. I'm thinking it should be out there for everyone to see before we make the final decision.
Councillor Brennan?
Oh, I totally agree. I mean, I read both of them, and they're pretty detailed. And I was thinking, I wonder what the businesses think of this. So it might be a good idea just to actually both of them to defer for now, and then each of us. I know Councillor Miller's with the DBA and Mr. Chair, you're with the chamber, so consult with them. I don't think they're time sensitive, and then get some comments, and then we can bring it forward at another date. So,
okay, Councillor Miller.
Thank you, and thank you to our planning team. They are really detailed reports. I did send the information through the DBA just on Thursday, so they've given a little bit of feedback, but certainly haven't had a chance to circulate it. So I would appreciate a couple of weeks so that they can go through their process.
Okay.
And I do support deferring them both.
Okay. Mayor Panko.
Yeah, I agree. Just wondering if there are any potential pending applications for a patio license. Businesses are eager to get going, and if there are, in the interim, would they be approved under the existing bylaw?
would you like to respond to that?
Yes, yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. So my understanding is there are a number of pre-consultations that have been scheduled for patio approvals. So what in 2020, council had approved a number of sort of temporary amendments to the 2013 patio bylaw that outlined a municipal approval process and a council approval process to accommodate sidewalk and patio occupancy. And that the measures that were approved in 2020 were intended to facilitate and make faster the operations that were in order to allow businesses to pivot to an outdoor commerce as best as they could. This was in a time when COVID was more substantial and indoor business occupancy was limited. So that so through that process, staff were approving patio occupancies. We've approved, I think, about a dozen or so in the downtown core, and then there is also a number of flexibilities in the design provisions that were in the previous patio bylaw as well that were sort of delegated to staff to address and work out with the proponents. So that was extended in 2021 and 2022. It did not. It was not those. That flexibility was not extended in 2023 because we were intending on bringing forward a new patio bylaw that would consider making permanent some of these measures. So to answer the questions, if we were to defer consideration of the bylaw this evening, then applicants would be subject to the current process and the current bylaw as it from 2013.
Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Senior Planner Grenke. And I know we're not getting into this conversation right now, but it makes sense to me to leave it as is. The government loans, particularly that our restaurants took advantage of during COVID, are coming due for repayment this year. And so I'm not really in any hurry to start putting fees back on. So I'm happy to defer the decision.
Okay, so can I have a show of thumbs or that we defer both of these? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, we got everybody's in favor of it. So we'll defer those tonight, Planner Grenke, 8.2 and 8.3 then.
Chair Robinson?
Oh, yes.
Sorry, CAO Morris has a comment, and if he doesn't cover what I'm going to say, I will have one as well.
All right. CAO Morris.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So effectively what this will mean is we will revert back to the most recent bylaw, which is from 2013, which is somewhat onerous. Oh. So if council wishes to defer, and it looks like you do, then I would suggest we bring forward a bylaw, and I'll look to our clerk to see if we're on the right track here, to extend the 2022 fast-tracked provisions so that we can keep them flowing for 2023. And we can put some time limitations on it, but if you don't take any action, it leaves a rather cumbersome process to approve 2023 applications.
Okay, so everybody look in favor. Okay, Mayor Panko, you want to talk?
Well, I guess let's clarify the intent of committee tonight. Are we looking to simply defer this issue, this item, priority item, to the next CAL, which means it pushes it back 1 or 2 weeks? Well, maybe, depends on the next CAL, it's maybe 3 weeks, I guess. If that's the case, then we perhaps should make a decision tonight if we're simply willing to maintain the existing provisions that were created in 2020 until such time as we revisit this. So I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor McGuire.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. The depth of the discussion we're having right now, I think, is beyond the agenda amendment. And I think we need to keep 8.3 on the agenda for tonight. Maybe not discussing it under the context of the report, but just to get whatever we need to do done in a more formal setting for it. So I would support keeping 8.1 and 8.3.
Okay. Councillor Brennan.
No, I think CO Morris made a great point. I'm not ready to get into this. I haven't talked to enough people about, I understand that. I think you said 2013, but we made some provisions in 2020, and I'm willing to keep those provisions until we get some feedback from business and that sort of thing. So I would suggest that maybe I think you suggested we do a bylaw or a motion or something next week to extend those 2020 provisions until we come up with a new sign bylaw, a patio bylaw. But let's extend them, and then let's get some feedback on the final bylaws, and then we can go ahead with the applications that are pending.
Clerk Costello.
I just want to echo what Councillor McGuire just said. Maybe if we could move this discussion and keep item 8.3 and just discuss the extension of the pandemic provisions under 8.3, and then we can have an action item moving forward. Most likely from this discussion being a bylaw just to extend those provisions, but we should discuss it under the priority issues.
Okay. All right. So we are deferring 8.2, correct? Yes. All right. So 8.3, the draft patio bylaw report. So Planner Granke, you want to bring it forward? Oh, CO Morris.
Mr. Chair, just in respect to the agenda, I would suggest we start with 8.1.
Oh, did I not do that?
Thank
Sorry.
you.
Okay. 6.1 is the or 8.1 is the agreement with the Village of Marrickville Wolford for animal control services report with Chief Cheeseborough.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The purpose of the report tonight is to seek council's approval to execute an agreement for a one-year pilot project with the Village of Marrickville Wolford for animal control services. Just over a year ago, or late last fall, we were approached by the Village of Marrickville Wolford seeking assistance dealing with stray dogs. In the course of transitioning to bylaw, they have raised the issue again to see if we would be willing to provide that service. The agreement would be for a one-year pilot project, and it was dealing strictly with stray dogs only. In the request, they indicated that they receive approximately 2 to 3 stray dog calls per year. The program would be provided by our bylaw enforcement officers. And to give you some of the highlights of the proposed agreement is, again, stray dogs only. The animal control officers will respond up to 6 calls per year. The animal control officer will prioritize and respond as appropriate. Priority given to Smiths Falls calls for service. We've indicated the hourly rate for regular hours at $40 per hour and then $55 per hour after hours. Mileage would be incurred from the town of Smiths Falls to that location and return, calculated at the provincial rate of 62 cents per kilometer. The invoices would be issued to Marrickville Wolford on a quarterly basis for the animal control services. The service would be provided as a pilot project and would come into force on the date of execution, expiring 12 months later. Prior to the expiry date, the program will be reviewed and assessed. Any extensions or renewal will be subject to mutual agreement by both parties. And either party may terminate the agreement at any time by providing the other party with written notification. It's important to note through the chair that the Village of Marrickville Wolford is in the process of having a legal interpretation of the agreement that's been proposed. We have undertaken that legal assessment last fall when it was first raised and there was no issues. And coincidentally, we both happen to use the same legal source for our interpretation. So I expect that they will get their interpretation quite quickly as to the merits of this agreement. So option one is that the council, the corporation of Town of Smith Falls receive and approve the recommendation to execute the agreement with the Village of Marrickville, Wolford for the purposes of animal control services. That's recommended. Option two is that the corporation of Smith Falls, Town of Smith Falls, does not proceed with option one and not execute an agreement. I think it's important to note that we've had an extremely good working relationship with Marrickville. We had entered into a shared services agreement on our behalf previously. And I think this is an important one to continue our cooperation between both jurisdictions. Any funds that would be received as a result of our response into Marrickville, Wolford would be offsetting the cost for the vehicle, the mileage, as well as the hourly rate. That is my report for this evening.
Thank you, Chief. Any comments? Councillor McKenna.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Chief. I do support your recommendation. My question is just stray dogs. So if a neighbor complains that a dog doesn't have a tag because they're required to in Marrickville, Wolford, or if there's a dog bite, our bylaw would not respond to those matters. Is that what I understand?
Through the chair, that is correct. And the as a note, we would not be receiving any of the calls directly. Our bylaw enforcement officers' numbers and the town numbers will not be published. This is Marrickville providing a service for the residents. Any calls would come directly from municipal staff of the Village of Marrickville, Wolford. Any calls for a dog bite, that requires a police involvement for that. So we would receive a copy of the report, but that is not a complaint or a concern that we would respond to.
Thank you.
Anybody else? So we all in favor of moving this forward? We're all in support. Okay, so we'll move that forward. So we're going to defer 8.2. So we'll move to 8.3 and back with Planner Grenke. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just I'll quickly summarize the report so that we can discuss the next way forward. But just as discussed earlier, patios are regulated under the 2013 bylaw that does establish a fairly substantial process to regulate for the approval process for patios on town property and design provisions for patios on town and private property. In the summer of 2020, we did the exceptions that were granted related to the fees, staff approved exceptions from the bylaw, as well as permitting the occupancy of public parking spaces for patios through staff approval. And that was and in addition to facilitating businesses through a difficult time with COVID, we also envisioned those improvements or those temporary fees as a way to sort of pilot a different regulatory approach to accommodate a harmonious streetscape and encourage people to use their streets downtown, create a more active and interactive landscape. And in 2022, we were directed to investigate making some of these changes permanent. So the proposed bylaw does reduce the scope of the patio bylaw from 2023 from 2013, and only covers patios and merchandise displays that are proposed to seasonally occupy municipal land. So private patios will be reviewed pursuant to the applicable sections of the Planning Act. So if there's a site plan approval or zoning provisions relating to patios on private properties, and permanent encroachments, if somebody were looking to permanently encroach upon municipal land with something that wouldn't be removed in the winter, then that would be reviewed through the town's encroachment bylaw. So for seasonal commerce, the bylaw establishes definitions for bistro tables and merchandise displays, and that includes furniture that's supposed to come in every night. So long as they meet the location, size, and safety parameters set out in the bylaw, then the bistro tables and merchandise displays will be excused from requiring a permit, and they can simply proceed. The permit requirement applies to other patios that are intended to remain open on a seasonal basis and is structured to and framed to accommodate flexibility, recognizing the varying streetscape designs and sidewalk widths, particularly in the downtown core. So a business on Beckwith Street has a different space to work with compared to a business on Russell. And that was discussed significantly in the drafting of the bylaw, and the provisions are intended to offer businesses the flexibility. So exemptions to obtain a permit, general provisions are that are contained in the bylaw are geared towards public safety requirements, with some high-level design provisions intended to maintain a compatible design between the building and the associated patio and merchandise display. And the proposed bylaw continues approving proposals at the staff level. The sidewalk lease permit would be a memorandum of understanding outlining the design, so the site plan and elevations approved by the town, as well as the terms and conditions for occupying town-owned lands. And the bylaw provides a template memorandum of understanding, and that will, of course, be customized on a case-by-case basis. The fee that is proposed for the patio applications is intended to cover staff costs of administration and inspections. And the fee is not intended to cover the occupancy of the space. It is not intended as a rental fee. In drafting the policy, I would like to acknowledge and recognize the significant work being undertaken by our planning clerk. Consultation was undertaken with building, fire, and public works department officials to ensure municipal operations and safety considerations are accommodated in the design provisions and also through the approvals that will need to happen. Staff have also undertaken surveys of businesses in the downtown last year before the bylaw was prepared, and the key theme we heard was that flexibility was important. And the feedback and experience through the approval of merchandise displays and bistro table proposals under current bylaws demonstrated that in the opinion of staff, there's limited value in regulating these aspects for both the business owners and the town. All feedback received from emergency services and public works was included to ensure consistent street operations and safe access to buildings in the event of an emergency. And the drafting of this bylaw was timed to align with the opening of the 2023 patio season. However, we look forward to council's direction and feedback on the matter, and certainly if council prefers to extend the previous flexibility on from 2022 on an interim basis, then we can definitely proceed on that. One item I will note is with respect to merchandise displays, and that was actually previously, or still is, in the 1994 sign bylaw. And we're proposing to remove the merchandise displays from the sign bylaw, as the function of a merchandise display is similar to a patio, and that is the sidewalk occupancy for business. And the merchandise displays are proposed to be regulated through the patio bylaw. We felt that was a more logical home for this commercial fixture, and the reason why the two bylaws are presented for approval this evening. So that's a quick summary of what's being proposed with the patio bylaw, and I'll certainly welcome council's discussion and direction in terms of the next steps. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor McGuire.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks a lot, Senior Planner Granke. It's great to read this because we've been talking about it through COVID. And one question I had was the 9 p.m. Marker to have stuff for the bistro tables back inside, and I think for the patios need to be vacated by 9 p.m. If we have a festival, I think it's 11 p.m. Our noise bylaw is 11 p.m. I'm wondering, could we extend it to 11 p.m. to be consistent with the other policies?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, that I don't, through you, Mr. Chair, I don't see a significant operational difference between 9 and 11, and but that is a change that with council's will, we can certainly look into penciling that in.
Okay, great. No, and I fully support the idea of keeping the fees off. I think everything from our downtown revitalization plan to our CIP to any best practices I've seen for downtowns, this is the kind of stuff we want. So I think for the getting value for dollars for economic development and tourism, waiving those fees for our businesses is a really good initiative.
Okay. Councillor McKenna.
Yeah, thank you. I support Councillor McGuire's suggestion around 11 p.m. I also heard that businesses were indeed consulted. So if that's the case, I'd be ready to support this bylaw at our next at the next council. So I'm ready to go ahead tonight if my colleagues are.
Okay. Councillor Brennan.
Yeah, not to hold things up, but I think that what we did during COVID is pretty proactive for our businesses, and I'd actually like to see what our neighbors are doing around this as well. And I think that if we just extend what we've done already, we could have a more fulsome discussion around the businesses and everything else going forward. But I think if we can just extend what we've already done, I think that'll help everybody out, and then we can have something in place going forward, post-COVID, after COVID, and forget about it, COVID after that. So
Councillor McGuire, and then Councillor, then Mayor Panko.
First there.
Mayor Panko, you can go.
Thank you. I guess, Carl, other than the implementation of the fees and the bistro provisions and the change with the some temporary sidewalk displays and stuff like that, what are the other provisions in here that are potentially more restrictive than 2020? What are there any real issues that could arise for our stakeholders?
Yeah.
Through Mr. Chair, I am just I'm taking a quick look at a couple of key points in the policy that'll so I'll need a minute before to respond to the mayor's inquiry.
Okay.
So if there is nothing significant, I'm also fine with moving ahead. And to Councillor McGuire's, I'll support Councillor McGuire's recommendation of a waiver of the fees.
And Councillor McGuire.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I've got a question for Senior Planner Granke too, so I could hold off. But I get similar vein where I'm wondering. Right now we've got you make your application, you've got 3 years where it's just going to be an annual inspection, and if it's going to be more onerous, if there's anything more onerous about the 2020 provisions than the new provisions to get the returning patios up and running.
And Councillor Miller.
Just while Carl is looking that up, one of the things that I can't figure out is, can our public patios still occupy parking spaces along the street? That was one of the things we changed during COVID, and I know it's been well received.
Okay. CAO Morris.
Yeah, so perhaps while Carl is having a look at the language, I'll raise 2 points, and I'll start by answering Councillor Miller's question. Yes, sidewalk extensions into the parking lane are allowed, provided there's an at-grade alternative that provides for safe passage of pedestrians. That comes at the cost of the applicant. So that's still in here. So around the fee, so what I'm hearing is there's some desire to waive the fees for 2023. So it would be important, we could draft it in such a way that the fees do not apply in 2023, but they would in subsequent years, if that's the will of or the desire of council. Am I reading that correctly, that it was just 2023 that that there was a sense we should not have fees? I guess the question or the dialogue is the principle of applying fees to this kind of thing, is that not something that council wants us to pursue? In the
long. Got any comments? Councillor Brennan?
Yeah, I'd like to see what their neighbors are doing as well.
Councillor McKenna.
The CIO raises a good point on the fees. I think I would be only supportive of perhaps 1 year, and I worry about the precedent. There's fees for just about everything else, and some of them do support, you know, festivals and all those things. Like, why do patios get the special? Anyway, so just it's a little tricky for me without just setting a precedent like that. So of course, keep them minimal, which I think they are. I guess because it's the hospitality industry and we're trying to help them get back on their feet. I could see, you know, waiving them this year, but in the long term, I think fees or cost recovery is part of what municipalities do. And if we can keep it to a minimum, that's great.
Councillor Quinn.
Thank you. I didn't mean to get so much started by saying we should be delaying this, but I really do believe that the business world needs to know what we're doing. Should it be delayed very long? No, it should move along as quickly as we possibly can. But I'm not sure that all the businesses out there have seen this. They haven't seen the sign bylaw. So how could they have seen the patio bylaw? That's my concern. I just want everybody to be aware of what is being proposed. I don't see anything that's really jumping out here and saying to me it wouldn't work, but I just want to make sure that the business community knows what we're doing. And as far as fees, I have to agree with Councillor McKenna. That's what we do. It's cost recovery. Everything else has a fee attached to it. Should it be a large fee? No, of course not. We want to encourage business. So maybe this year for sure, it could be forgiven and then look at next year. But I do think that the business world needs to know what it is we're proposing with the patios. I don't want to see anybody held up. I don't. If they want to get their patios open, for sure, when the sun shines. But I do think that they should know what's happening.
Thanks. Mayor Panko?
Yeah, no, my thought, the fees is a waiver for this year and reinstatement next year, barring exceptional circumstances like another pandemic or some other thing that hits us. But I'm fine with it for this year. And before to Carl's reply on my question.
You want to go ahead, Carl?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I dug into and found the specific provisions that were either waived or I guess altered in terms of the process in 2020 and 2021. So that was the conditions there is approval shall not be granted in locations where municipal operations or construction may be impeded. Certainly that's carried forward in this bylaw. There are provisions of 0.5 meter clear zone and reflective posts are provided at corners facing traffic. Those were design provisions that were included in 2021 and would be part of the approval and would be part of the negotiated and site-specific approval in this case. There is a provision regarding the necessity of maintaining sufficient clear passage on the sidewalk. That was and that is where we extended the where we allowed parking spaces to be occupied, as CAO Morris indicated. That is proposed to be carried forward. Fees were waived at that particular in 2020, 2021, and 2022, and then that provision delegated to staff the authority to grant variances subject to any internal and external consultations. That would still be carried forward. So in this case, I don't see anything that is more restrictive now than what was in the case beforehand. There's some of the design related elements of the previous patio are not included in this one, just recognizing the diversity of landscapes and streetscapes in the downtown core, and to enable that flexibility of conversation between the town and various departments in the town and proponents, to make sure that a patio fits the right context there, given that there is a very different landscape character. In terms of consultation, certainly the crafting of the bylaw focused heavily on the technical departments and agencies within the organization. Previously, the consultation with business owners was before the bylaw was developed. We were just looking for what business owners wanted to see and some broad principles to sort of guide the development of the policy. But yes, it is the bylaw itself and the specific proposed policies have not been widely circulated until more recently being conveyed to the DBA. So we'll welcome council's feedback on the next steps there.
Councillor McGuire.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks a lot, Carl. So what I'm hearing is whether we extend 2022 or go with this new bylaw, the amount of effort that it's going to take to get a patio up this season is going to be about the same. But if we go with the extension of 2022, we're not going to have the advantage of the 3-year easy renewal process, I guess, that this new bylaw gives us. Is that correct?
Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we have in 2022, we have been issuing fairly easy renewals for patios that were approved previously, just on an annual basis.
Okay, sounds good. So then in that case, I'm okay with extending last year's arrangement for this year, and then we can give the business community the chance to look at this as much as they need to. Personally, as on the topic of the fees, I'd support more of a longer term, like a 5-year window for waiving the fees, because I think of the outdoor patios in Smith Falls, it's still an early adopter kind of window. When I look at other communities where they've really been leveraged, I don't see the same level of street engagement in town. So I'd be open to something a little bit longer to just give people that are on the fence about trying it out that chance to go forward with it.
Councillor Brennan.
Yeah, as I said before, I support extending what we have in place, and what Councillor McGuire was talking about and other things we could talk about when we finally get a new sign by. But for now, let's extend what we've got going, and then let's consult, and then we can discuss in detail what the bylaw is going to look like. But let's extend things right now and let people get their patio set up.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that we are in support of extending the 2022 rules and deferring the patio bylaw until such time as it's had an opportunity to be well read by all businesses. Is that what everybody's thinking of? Yeah. Oh, yes, Carl.
So to confirm council's direction and the next steps, my understanding is, should the extension of 2022 have a specific date associated with it, or should it just be extended until a permanent patio bylaw is established? And the second question to confirm the direction of council is you're looking for consultation specifically with our DBA and chamber community, or is there different consultation that council would like us to undertake before we bring this back to you?
I don't think that we would need to have anything further than the DBA and the chamber, but what's everybody think? I see most people nodding or giving a thumbs up. So yeah, chamber and the DBA would be what I would suggest. And what does everyone think on the time frame until there's enough feedback and it gets brought back, or just until the end of patio season for this year? What's the thought? Anybody got Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think if we're going to extend the 2022 bylaw, which I'm fine with, it takes the pressure off reviewing this again until we face the end of the season. So I think I would suggest we leave it to CAO Morris to fit this into an appropriate agenda in the coming months.
Everybody in favor of that? Yeah, it looks like it. So that's what we'll do. So CA Morris, you know what you're gonna do, correct?
Yes, we do. And so we will bring a bylaw or a resolution, probably a bylaw next week to extend the existing provisions.
Okay.
So we will not bring that back to committee of the whole for discussion. We'll take it directly to council.
Okay.
In the interest of time.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. Thank Councillor McGuire.
Sorry, one last question. Just to confirm, does the extension allow the patios to operate till 11 p.m. as well?
I thought that was what everybody was agreeing on.
Great question. Carl, do you know the answer?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, it would, and we can make sure if that's council's will, we can review the wording and make sure that is indeed the case.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
All right. Well, we've got at least 4, so that's great. All right. So moving on, did we want to bring an 8.4 for a declaration for maybe Clerk Costello could enlighten me on this, for us to make a declaration regarding intimate partner violence? Do we need to bring that forward right now?
If council would like to discuss it at any length, we could add as a priority item. Usually we add anything that it's going to go forward to council or the council needs to make a decision on as a priority item. I know that they had a discussion, but if we wanted to formally add it as 8.4 and then 8.5 as the Friends of Cataraqui Trail, then we can have a very quick discussion on those 2 items and bring the appropriate motions forward at the next council meeting.
Well, that was kind of what I was thinking, because I already had them both written down as 8.4 and 8.5.
Perfect.
So any further discussion on the intimate partner violence and violence against women as an epidemic? Everybody in favor of moving that forward to the next council meeting? Looks like it, so we'll do that. And then 8.5, moving forward to council to appoint Councillor Don Quinn as the representative for the Cataraqui Trail Board. Everybody in favor of that? Okay, well, we'll move that forward to the next meeting too. All right. So I think that's it. So we're down to adjournment. I have a recommended motion that committee adjourn its proceedings at 7:43 p.m. and stand so adjourned until the next duly called committee meeting. Can I have a mover? Councillor Brennan, seconded by Councillor Quinn. All in favor? Well, approved. Everybody have a great night.
Good night.
Bye.
Good evening.